Good morning, and I'd like to start with also thanking Tom Fingar and Mike Wertheimer for their vision and also their willingness to take a risk. And that risk was worth it to drive transformation. Ronald Reagan once said, there are no limits to growth because there are no limits to human intelligence, imagination, and to wonder. What better way to test that theory than to bring together creative and talented professionals who in the past had very little interaction. What interaction they did have was fraught with distrust and lack of credibility. And what better place to do that than the heart of Disney World, where imagination is a core value. The Disney security team uses a credo. It's called Protect the Magic. It was something we adopted as well. Protect the magic, those critical sources and methods that are endemic to keeping our competitive advantage against all foreign and domestic adversaries, but also to challenge the underlying constraints about information sharing and legal obstacles, and to lay bare those policies that are preventing collaboration. This was not yet another information sharing opportunity where the old premise from law enforcement to the national level is, I'll show you mine, and you may or may not show mine back to me with no value added, or you classify it, and then I'll never see it again. It was so much more than that. We challenged these professional colleagues from two of the oldest professions in the world, at least two of the oldest legal professions in the world, to work through a seemingly intractable problem, the parallels between criminality and terrorism, because we believe those two to be inextricably intertwined. There are, in fact, similarities in the signatures of individuals and groups which cross cultural divides, fueled by an underground economy and fed by a need to accumulate finances, weapons, converts, and the ability to hide in plain sight under false identity and false documents. We operated from the premise that while every criminal is not a terrorist, every terrorist is in fact a criminal, and they exploit the same methodologies that criminals have through history. We asked if the streetcraft of law enforcement can inform and influence operational tradecraft, and moreover, can it influence national collection and analysis? Can 750,000 collectors responsible for standing the watch provide insight and perhaps access to hard targets through community policing and joint assignments? Can we apply a metric to, and in fact, teach the ability in razor-like fashion to see what is invisible to the untrained eye? And can we understand the adaptation cycle of the adversary to anything that comes out from the national level intelligence community? Dynamics of this group were really fascinating, and my job was pretty easy. It was to lead, to follow, and sometimes to referee, oftentimes to get the heck out of the way and let creative people do what creative people do, challenge one another. Sometimes we actually had slugfests when somebody would come out with their organizational bias and say, by God, we do it this way, and we've always done it this way, and we always will. And then people would just kind of back up in their chairs, and the fights would be on. I knew we were successful when we saw computers at choir practice and people, even in the heart of Disney World with their families with them, that they worked on Saturdays and Sundays, and they worked at 11 and 12 at night and 1 o'clock in the morning, and the collaborative workspace continues to this minute, actually. For the next 40 minutes, take a walk with us through the eyes of practitioners. I think you'll see the bleeding edge of law enforcement where the optic is different than what you're used to. It's a lot more real time, it's a lot more visceral. And with that, let me introduce Dr. David Brannan from the Naval Postgraduate School. Get him, Dave.
Morning. Thanks for letting us come talk to you. You know, on page 11 of the little book that you have in your folder, it describes what the SHARP program is and was and hopefully will continue to be. But for me, the SHARP program was about this. It's, can cops inform analysis? And all the cops up here, we were awful glad somebody was asking, because we dang sure think that we can inform analysis. Now, I'm a lecturer at the Naval Postgraduate School now. Before that, I was the Director of Security Policy for the CPA and the Ministry of Interior in Iraq from 03 and 04. Before that, I was a RAND analyst and political scientist working on terrorism and insurgency issues. And I went to school at St. Andrews. My master's and my PhD are from St. Andrews, and I don't even play golf very well. And I really hoped that they had called me to come participate in the SHARP program because they had read something I had written on insurgency or something I'd written on terrorism. But the fact is, before all that, I was a cop for 12 years in Southern California. I got wounded and they got rid of me. I worked the streets. I was a SWAT cop for 6 of those years. But my time as a cop informs everything that I do in looking at Homeland Security or terrorism or insurgency. And how it informs how I look at that, it turns out that it was very similar to what some of my other colleagues had experienced or were experiencing. When I went to Baghdad, it was the first time I'd worked with the military closely, and I found out that if you put 2 acronyms, a verb, 2 more acronyms, and a noun, it actually is a sentence. And I didn't even know what any of the acronyms were. But I'm going to ask you today to learn yet another acronym. And I think it's really important, and it's JDLR. In polite company, that just doesn't look right. The way cops talk, it just don't look right. Okay? And that is very, very important, because just don't look right is cop talk for streetcraft, or the way we make decisions in an instant that may have life or death outcome. Throughout the month, and here we had 34 folks. Dr. Kiernan was way too polite. There were serious disagreements and often arguments, both at the swamp and in the office. The swamp being the location where the evening work actually took place. Because people were very passionate about having their voice heard, because they believe they bring something to this question, to this problem. Throughout this time, they asked us to try to identify, a cop goes into a situation and he makes an instant decision. Well, is that just his trick knee telling him what to do? Can you define that? Can you somehow put something to that can be replicated? And yes, we found that we absolutely can. Those senses that are being brought to bear are highly developed, but they are replicatable and they're measurable. And that becomes important if we're going to transfer that to analysts that might benefit from their efforts. And I came up with 5. There's actually many more, but 5 that we're going to talk, or I'd like to look at briefly today. And the first is passion. Cops who have a highly developed street sense have a great passion for the job. You may think it's because of the huge amounts of money they're making that they're driven to do this. That's not it. They don't have the 8 and out mentality. They are passionate about putting crooks in jail. They want to take bad guys to jail. And I know, they tell young cops when they come on the job, they're there for this sense of service and they want to help the community, and that's all well and good. The reality is the reason they're willing to risk life and limb is because they want to put bad guys in jail, and it's exciting. You have to have that passion. The second issue is risk. Every day a cop puts on his uniform, he is at great risk. He or she is at great risk. Perhaps will die for the decision that they make. And so they want to make exactly the right decision because they want to go home to their wife and or husband or kids. Hopefully they don't have both of those at the same time. The risk that they have is very real and has immediate consequences. And so that developed sense, that street sense that's developed, is developed in a real pressure cooker of risk. A third issue is immersion. Cops are living with communities daily. They don't come to some foreign office, they're here for a couple of months and or years and then go on to somewhere else. They're in a small community, and I'm looking forward to what Mike McClary has to tell you about that. And being a part of that community is very important to understanding how what's right, how you know what is right, looks right. Excuse me. Fourth is this devolved decision making. You know, a 21-year-old cop comes out of the academy, and the first day he's on the street, he may be called to shoot somebody, and then to defend that action in court later. In law enforcement, they devolve the decision making to the lowest possible level, and that also informs how they develop that street sense. And then the last is time. It sometimes just takes a little time repeatedly seeing what is right and wrong over and over again so that you can make that decision in an instant. This street sense capabilities is, you know, I see it domestically in law enforcement all the time, and talking to other cops, you know, over and over and over again, examples of it. But when I was in Iraq, we were trying to find the right people to put in the right jobs. At one point, we hired 30,000 cops in 30 days. Real vetting went into that. And so we're finding that we're not having the right people in the right jobs. And in one area in particular, in Diyala and Bakuba, Bakuba is kind of important to me because I left part of myself there, took part of it home with me. Over and over again, we couldn't get the right people in the right place there. And it took somebody with street sense to show us why. When an Egyptian-born, but Australian policeman working for the CPA at that point came, and he was fluent in the language, and he was Sunni, and he understood the culture. And suddenly he had the JDLR. He had the, it just doesn't look right. He recognized who was wrong in which positions and was able to help us put the right people there. And suddenly we could make a difference. So even at the international level, that JDLR factor is very, very important. Unfortunately, they killed him the next week, but we did put him there shortly. You're going to see that each one of us just have a very short segment of this because it was 30 days of rather intensive work. And now I'd like to introduce Kelley McCormick, who is the Deputy Superintendent for Homeland Security at Boston PD. You know, it's not Kelley's JD degree or his position that makes him important to our work. What I found from him, both in the office and at the swamp, was that it was his understanding of the street that really informed his work there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. I'm on mic 5. Can you hear me fine? I'll take that as a no. Easier if I work from the microphone? From this one? Okay, thank you. My name is Kelley McCormick. I'm the Deputy Superintendent with Boston Police. We have one slide. I'm not going to kill you by PowerPoint, I promise. Got the one slide pop up, please? Running through. What do these 5 people have in common? Everybody know who they are? No, they're all terrorists. Domestic homegrown terrorism, international terrorism. What else do they have in common? We'll take one at a time. Top left, Mohammed al-Khatami. You can just click through the slide, it'll automatically punch him out. Al-Khatami, 20th hijacker. Suspicious activity walking through the airport, Orlando Airport. One Customs and Border person had a bad feeling about him. Really felt the story wasn't good. His body language was terrible. He was showing that he was trying to deceive, that there was something else about him, but not a lot to hang it on. He was a Saudi resident. They usually don't have problems passing through. But he took the extra time to say, just doesn't look right. It'll pull him out. Second guy, Timothy McVeigh, bad driver's plate on the car, bad license plate on the car, caused the police officer to stop him and continue the investigation because something, once again, just didn't seem right. Next one, Eric Rudolph. Eric's the Olympic bomber, abortion clinic bomber, a rookie, Brand new police officer, 1 week on the street, saw him dumpster diving behind a building. Really felt he didn't look like someone who plays the role of a dumpster diver, and really kept pushing it to find out who he was. Turns out that that rookie gets a top 10 FBI most wanted list arrest in his first week on the job. Yi Kikamura, in the bottom right, Japanese Red Army. New Jersey State Trooper finds him in a rest stop in New Jersey acting suspicious. Really can't tell what he wants to do there or where he's going. Trooper gets in the car and finds all the bomb equipment. The last one's Ahmad Rassan, Millennium Bomber, Border Patrol agent up in Canada for the U.S. at the Canadian border. Has him coming over the border. His story's terrible. He can't get his act together. He seems very nervous. She says, "Do you mind if I look in the trunk?" They go and open the trunk, and there's all the bomb stuff for the Millennium bombing. And he took off running. It was another probably good indicator he didn't want to stay around. But he's captured. So you have 5 officers, 5 law enforcement officers on the ground working hard, you know, looking for that very small thing. And it's a small thing. The small things get you the big things. Those small indicators, those small signals, signatures, things that we're all out there searching for all the time. It's that small thing that tips us to the big things. So it begs the question, if 5 law enforcement officers in the United States can do that, how come we haven't trained 750,000 of them to do the same thing? You heard Tim Samples say that analysis drives collection. At the SHARP program, we developed the planning on how to train out all those people, and it's very in-depth and complex. But the basis is getting people in that situational awareness and using analysis to drive that collection. If you teach people what is right, they'll know what is wrong. So when they go into a place and they say, "That's not right," I don't really know what it is, but I know it's not right. That's analysis. They're doing an analysis for us right there, and that information drives more collection because it can get pushed through that conduit up to the IC community, out to other agencies, where people can continue to work that product. It's that ability to filter that info, which is our analysis, which drives us towards looking at what the next thing we have to do with that information. You know, but law enforcement would always refer as persistent collectors. We're always out there collecting. But everybody in this room is a persistent collector. I can prove it. Show of hands, please. How many people have children here? Great. You are all persistent collectors. You are living in an environment constantly where you're constantly assessing and evaluating everything going on and all the noise in the house and all the little signs and signals of everything's going well. But what happens when it gets real quiet in the house? What's the first thing you do? You go looking for the kids. Why? Because they got the family cat duct taped to the wall, or the dog's getting a new haircut. You know, it's those things, but that's what triggered you to that. It wasn't a big event. It wasn't an explosion. It was a very small thing that was out of place. You picked it up right away. You evaluated it. You made the decision, and you went forward to continue that investigation and drive that analysis and collection forward. When we were down in Florida, one of the things we realized is that's where the big disconnect for us with law enforcement and dealing with the intelligence community was. It was one of the real hard problems that we're trying to break through. Law enforcement can provide a lot of information, provide tons of information. Information isn't the key, because it's like spraying the intel community with a fire hose again. There's so much information going at them that it's very tough for them to deal with it and sort it out. And they run at the disability of sometimes they don't have the context. And the context that the information comes is possibly sometimes even more important than that specific information, because it might be very small things. We call it cultural context. What we did down at Sharp was I gave a problem to all the analysts in the room. And I'll give you the same problem. It's just a very quick scenario, and see what the reasonable inferences you can draw from this are. The fashion for kids in Boston is baggy sweatshirts with hoods, baggy pants, untied shoes. That's all the information you have as an intel person. I'll now call you with some more information. Here's the information. We saw all those same kids, and they were all hanging out. Their hoods were tied, pants tied up, shoes tied. What's the reasonable inferences you can make from that information? Nerds. The weather's changing. The weather's going to get bad. You know, it's going to rain, it's going to snow. Change in fashion. MTV says that's not cool anymore. That's fine. Those are all very valid, reasonable inferences you can make from that information. But if you talk to the gang, someone's got over here. If you talk to the gang guys in Boston from my old command, and they come by and they tell us on the air, hey, everybody's laced up, tied up. All the shoes are tied up. We know that means there's going to be a shooting. You know, it's the context that we put that information of just very small things and tie it into everything else we know about that information. And what feeds that story, that context is the biggest part of the information. That's what we're not translating well back and forth. You know, that's why we have 10 billion, trillion pieces of information, and we can't sort through it because a lot of it comes without context. If we don't have the context, we can't help the IC community. What we're looking to do is change that and get the IC community involved with us to help them come down. Because if the IC community gets that, and they get the context, you know, or they work with us and they're continually within that context, that atmosphere of what's going on, you get that aha moment that we spoke about earlier. Because once you get the aha moment, it puts everything together. It starts putting the pieces of that puzzle together much better than you had it before. And like I said, it's not connected dots. It's a mosaic of puzzles on top of puzzles that you need to sort out. But it will definitely point us better in the direction of, now that I have this information, where do I drive it next? And where do I go with it next? So the final part is, you know, as you look at all these things, and we looked at a lot of the problems down there, and we said, well, what works? You know, the things I love, Razor program. Take a hard charge in young people and give them an opportunity to take something and run with it. How can you lose? You know, I'm looking forward to having them. I've already been asking for a Razor team. I'd love to be one of the test groups. And everyone, all my colleagues here from all the major departments at that thing volunteered to take them. You know, it can't hurt us. It can only help us, you know, to bring in young people with a different perspective and get them out there, get them understanding what we see from law enforcement view so that we can help Intel look at what they're seeing. And then in return, Intel runs the other side of that conduit. They see a lot of things that they can bring to us and say, hey, this is what we're seeing and might fit a better pattern for something that you guys are looking at that we had no clue on, just because we didn't have that ability to take that broader picture look or collect that diverse data sources. We think the second thing that works real well is the analyst-operator hybrid. In Boston, we have the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, the BRIC. The BRIC is police officers, investigators, and analysts, not just co-located in the same room. They're paired up with each other, and they continually work in each other's environments so that they cross-train each other in what they're doing, and that the analyst has a better understanding of what he sees on the street in the context of the information coming up off the street, so he can help us plug it together too. It's a lot of fun for them too. The officers have all enjoyed it. They've enjoyed learning the new analytical ways of doing things because we don't train on that a lot, so it becomes a very specialized skill for them. It's almost, I think Dr. Fenger said, it called it integrated enterprise. That's what it is. We're just plugging people together. So we don't have all horses on the chessboard. But I got a lot of pieces on the chessboard that are all moving together, doing different things. That builds out a good program. The last thing is reoccurring interaction between people who have Streetcraft and people who from the Intel community, analytical experts, to co-develop skill sets. You know, and I call them skill sets, you know, because they're not a tool. If I got a tool to fix my car, I beat the engine because I don't know how to fix cars. You know, but a skill set would teach me how to fix the car, and I could use that tool. So developing the skill sets that we both bring to this process, because in the end, there's only truly one goal. It's to interrupt and interdict threats to the homeland. And it's a serious goal. I'm from Boston. I'm a Ted Williams fan. Ted Williams batted .406. In our game, I can't bat .406, and no one in this room can afford to bat .406. You know, we're playing at a whole different level on how we have to deal with these threats. And basically, success is subtle. Failure is obvious. So we know we're out there, and we know we're putting our necks out here by doing this job, because we know what the cost of failure is. With that, I'd like to bring up my associate from Las Vegas PD, Assistant Sheriff Mike McClary.
Good morning. I was asked this morning to talk about Streetcraft from the perspective of one medium-sized law enforcement agency in the country. But before I do that, I need to check with my attorney. For the press folks that are here, the comments or opinions that I make are not necessarily those of Sheriff Doug Gillespie, the men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department, nor are they intended to represent any other law enforcement agency that may or may not have been mentioned. Okay? Good. Thank you. I want to dispel just a couple of misnomers about the city that I represent. And the first is that my city is built on gambling. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not. Gambling assumes you have a chance. I have a city that's built on entertainment. And we encourage all of you to come out and entertain yourself to the maximum level that your wallet will allow. And I'm certainly hopeful that INSA or the DNI will consider having this conference in Las Vegas next year or next week. We certainly could, if you'd give me about 15 minutes, I could make that arrangement. So what I was asking to do is paint a landscape for you, again, of one medium-sized law enforcement agency in the country, and I won't even posture to you that necessarily represents all law enforcement agencies, but I think it'll give you a feel of what, from my interaction across the country and with my peers, what's going on. The city that I police, or the community that I police, is about 7,650 square miles. We have 17 of the 20 largest hotels in the world. We have about a $40 billion tourist and convention industry. Who do we police? About 1.8 million people. I got a city that's growing by about 5,200 people a month are moving into my community. We have 39 million visitors, 5 million of whom are foreign. We have about 46 million people that pass through our airport every year. The people and reasons visitors come to our city are as varied as they are. Large percentages come to experience one or all of our industry slogans, and I'm sure you've heard just a few of these. Be anyone in Las Vegas. All I did was the alibi website, and now you can actually go on a website and it'll create an alibi for you. It's an interactive website, so if you change your lie, you can change your alibi. What happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. Well, that's true, except in the fine print on the bottom, it says, except it's on video. And I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. Among our visitors have been some individuals with more nefarious intentions. Timothy McVeigh, Terry Nichols, 5 of the 19 9/11 hijackers. Why did they come to our city? We know there's more unknown than there is known about why those folks are here. Maybe it's for the reasons I stated above, maybe it was for others. Now the Streetcraft. How do we police the city that I live in? I need to first start by saying that every law enforcement officer raised their right hand and swore to serve and protect their communities in this country. The unstated third tenet of that oath was to act as collectors. We have been collecting information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, long before Homeland Security entered into our lexicon. In the intelligence community, you use a term called human, right? She's there to correct me if I misspeak. What that means to the city I serve is this. We average 380,000 law enforcement interactions with the citizens and visitors of our community a year. During those encounters, we're going to write 330,000 misdemeanor citations for everything from traffic to urinating in public. We incarcerate approximately 91,000 members of our community or people who visit. So if you come to Las Vegas and you screw up, we will hang paper or you will go to jail rather quickly. And these figures don't include non-law enforcement interactions that we have with our community, from the community groups, special interest groups that we interact with every day. That's an opportunity for huge human, ladies and gentlemen. More than 380,000 times a year. I've also been told that the intelligence community uses a term called SIGINT, all right? I am batting 1,000. This is what it means in our city. We use legal technical means last year 3,841 times to collect technical data during investigations. As a result of those technical means, we have resident in our database as more than 200,000 legally collected, and the emphasis being on legally, phone numbers, of which over 2,500 of those are foreign numbers. We possess more than 2.5 million subject photographs. We have archived and cataloged more than 21,000 hours of video surveillance, and this figure does not include that possessed by private enterprise, which I referenced above on the except it's on tape. They're a huge partner for us. If we counted what we get made available to us from our industry, we would literally go well over 200,000 hours in a year. What does this all mean? What does this all mean? More than 380,000 times a year, officers in our city are engaged in persistent collection. That's what we do. Of human and technical intelligence. These encounters have the potential to provide both contextual and cultural significance to the intelligence collected when the collectors are properly attuned and trained. Federal law enforcement and the intelligence community possess far larger quantities of both. The challenge today is still that in some cases we can't share. In others, we don't. And we don't share what we know. Now, I'll finish up with comments about SHARP. And I got to tell you, from a cop's perspective, when I became aware that I was going to attend the SHARP conference, And the first thing I did was I asked for a conference roster. They said, well, you can't have that. I said, well, why not? I said, well, you just can't. And I said, okay. I'm used to working with the federal government. And so finally there came a time when they sent us a roster, and I think there was 6 law enforcement agencies represented, some academics, and their names are all there. And then there was a whole bunch of, and I need to back up, in police parlance, we have something we call FNU-LANU. First name unknown, last name unknown. And so I got this roster, and I thought it was a Chinese gourmet convention I was going to, because it was Bob, Mike, Tim, Lanu. Lanu, all the way down the bottom. And I'm like, jeez, they want to keep it that much of a secret. But what we collectively became aware of is that the intelligence community and local law enforcement face many of the same challenges. We all possess more data sets and can be effectively analyzed. We all face the challenge of being able to provide meaning, contextual, and culture to the data we possess. We also realized rather quickly that much of the streetcraft we use and the tradecraft the intelligence community uses is similar and is of value to each other if we share it. Now that concludes my remarks, and I have the opportunity now to introduce to you Technical Director Sheila Stokes. I'm a local, so I don't know where she works, and I didn't ask, but it was an absolute pleasure to spend time with her. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sheila Stokes, and I am a senior analyst with the National Security Agency. So now you know, Mike. Might have to kill you now, though. So as a senior analyst, I applied for the SHARP program because I thought that I could bring something to the table. I had something to offer. I could educate and train my law enforcement colleagues on my tradecraft, collection, and analysis. However, I never, ever imagined that I would be learning collection and analysis from the law enforcement side. It was just an amazing experience to work with academia and law enforcement. I can't begin to detail how much I learned from them, but you can catch me on a break. We'll all be here after hours as well. But I would like to talk a little bit about my aha moment. My aha moment came with the police ride-alongs. We all had an opportunity to go out with the state troopers and the local police department on the ride-alongs. I had the privileged opportunity of going out with the contraband interdiction team. That's the drug enforcement team. They were set up on one of the major highways, and they would assess the traffic going back and forth. So on one occasion, we were actually in a ditch, and I was talking to the cop. And well, after I eased his concerns that I was not listening to his phone calls last night, and we don't have satellites beaming in his bedroom or his bathroom or any other section of his house, we just started talking back and forth about our tradecraft. So I learned a lot about what he did. I couldn't tell him too much about what I did, but I learned quite a bit about what he did. So as we were talking back and forth, all of a sudden he kind of floors it out the ditch, and I'm going back, and he was looking at me, as he was talking, and I'm wondering, what in the world did you see? What could you have possibly noticed in that instant that caught your attention? And sure enough, he said he noticed that there was a rental car, and all the windows were tinted, and that's a sign. That's an indicator that something, as they say, just ain't right. Who rents a car? Who tints the windows? On another occasion, he just started telling me about what he looks for. Another thing he looks for is a relatively new car. All the windows are rolled down. So on one occasion, he pulled over a mother and her 2 children. It was 105 degrees outside. Again, all the windows are rolled down. And when he pulled them over, sure enough, he found a car full of drugs. And I was just amazed at how they, within seconds, they're able to collect the data, process the data, analyze it, and act upon it, because they only have seconds. One night, or that evening, it was actually about 9 or 9:30, and we're out on the highway on the median strip. It's pitch black. I don't see anything but headlights. how in the world they can assess something pitch black. We're on the median, and again, we're like this. I said, could you at least warn me when we're going out of this ditch at 100 miles an hour? Don't have time, we're on it. And I said, you're just showing off. There's no way in the world that you could pick something out in the pitch black. Well, it was a whole team of them, and we pulled them over, and sure enough, there was a guy smuggling illegal aliens in. He had, passengers in the car. He had a case full of money and a case full of fake IDs, and they wrote a report on it. So for me, that was my aha moment. How much the Streetcraft, their tradecraft, how they hone their tradecraft and have the ability to instantly, within seconds, and sometimes in a life or death situation. There were times when he knew to put his hand on his gun when he approached the car. And he told me what he looked for, where he said it could be potential danger in the car. So for me, I'm thinking about, I'm a senior analyst. How can I take the Streetcraft back to my agency and implement it and integrate it in what I do? Now, please don't type that NSA said that we're now working with domestic intelligence. We're not doing domestic intelligence. We're strictly foreign. I don't want to see anything in the Washington Post or in the Sun paper that we're now doing domestic intelligence. We're not. What I am saying that as a senior analyst, and most of you out here as senior analysts, we do have the responsibility to go beyond our internal tradecraft, go beyond the scope of what we know that we do and we do well. NSA knows that we do SIGINT well. We do SIGINT very well. We have exceptional analysts. However, I must say that most of our training is focused on our internal tradecraft. We don't go beyond what we do. And so it would be, I just think how empowered we would be if we went beyond, if we used other techniques from the law enforcement, how we can integrate what they do into what we do to complement our skills and our techniques. Whether it's behavioral analysis, they do pattern analysis and signatures and the cultural intelligence, all of that needs to come over to our community and be integrated in what we do. And that for me would be very much amazing. So overcoming our fears and facing challenges of change can be a painstaking process. To champion our vision, we must be willing to deviate from conventional methods, strive through the seemingly endless hurdles and roadblocks, and continue confidently and with courage to reach our goals. We must accept the fact that not only do we have the power and the ability to change, we now have the opportunity to change. And we would like to thank Dr. Fingar and Dr. Wertheimer for giving us, the SHARP participants, a chance to meet each other, a chance to collaborate with each other, a chance to work together to help come up with recommendations to implement change. And again, we'd like to thank definitely Dr. Kathleen, because she was amazing in keeping us kind of all just balanced and focused on what we needed to get done. Thank you.
A comment that Sheila, and thanks for the compliment, but a comment Sheila didn't make is that the captain that ran those contraband interdiction teams was one of our participants. And when we were talking about the final brief, somebody mentioned the Beltway, and he thought the Beltway was a soccer term. His young daughter had just received a soccer scholarship, and he says, we use that vernacular. The point that he didn't know what the Beltway was, and it really didn't matter to him, he knew what he knew, and he gave us ground truth, is the kind of capabilities and information that is going to drive that transformation at the national level. With that, please give another round of applause to an amazing team of practitioners who will be here later to answer questions, and thank you very much.